Okay, so today I'm looking at Sergei Zagny's Three Pieces for Piano, 1990. Um, okay. This is a Russian composer. We've looked at one or two pieces of his already. And so yeah, we have performance notes in Russian and English. And there's a lot here to get into, like a lot of symbols. Um, Zagny is also an improviser, so there's like some aleatoric stuff in here that I think is must be pretty unique to his own practice because it's quite a lot to try and grasp at first. So these pieces split into parallel paths, and the performer decides each time which one to take, and some paths seem preferable to others. I indicate this by the means of numbers and other signs. Preferable is what I myself usually wish to play in here, but sometimes I choose something else. Um, so there's this idea of like sort of weighted distribution in your aleatoric piece. Um, so it's sort of split up into repeats, omissions, which I guess are sections that you don't have to play, variants, so sections which can be played in either one way or another, and then um, he has optional ties, and then all these kinds of different fermatas and arpeggios. I guess we'll get into that in a bit. So some of it is approaching like Baroque decoration, like um, and yeah, I guess he often uses clefs with the octave sign, and then there's some miscellaneous symbols that occur. So let's just do this in order. I'll see if I can find some examples in the score. So there's two different symbols for repeat, I guess, so that one can exist within the other at different layers. But yeah, basically these things both mean repeat, and if there's a number underneath, it should be played the indicated number of times. See if I can find this. So it appears a little bit different in the score than what I'm seeing, but you can see in brackets in the middle, there's a number. So this means repeat 5 times in the first measure of piece number 1. Then you repeat the next one 4 times. Then this one you repeat 9 times, etc. If there's a slash, it indicates 2 paths for the repeats. You can repeat it 3 times or 5 times in this example. So let's see if I can find that. Here we have a measure at the bottom of the first page that is 2/3. So you can repeat it 2 times or 3 times. Um, Same up here. And actually, we have a 5/7 on the first page as well. Then we have these underscores and overscores. So the underscore with a number means play at least that number, like repeat it at least that number of times. And then above means repeat no more than that number of times. Here we have a 3 path, so 3/5/7. Okay, on this page, still page number 4 of the first piece, we have underlined 11. So you can repeat this at least 11 times. That's basically it. 3/5 is used in the context of repeats within repeats, right? So if you come back to the same repeated section in a repeat, right, it can have different numbers, right? Because the first time you play it, you can repeat it X amount of times, and then when you come to it again, you can repeat it Y amount of times, right? So that's all the comma means. The example here is 3/5. Let's see if I can find an example of that. Probably doesn't happen that often. The first one we see is in the second piece, actually. So we have a 7 comma 5 here. So you can see in the first line there's these two measures, right? The whole thing you repeat at least 2 times. When you play it the first time, this second measure you repeat it 7 times, and then I'm assuming all subsequent ones you would repeat it 5 times. This measure, right? Um, oh, sorry, that's not at least two, that's up to two. So, okay, path one, you play this measure and then this measure 7 times. Path number two, you play this measure, then you play this measure 7 times, then you play this measure again, then you play this measure 5 times. That's it. So those are the only two paths for that. Then something more complicated is going on here because we haven't gotten to this n comma y thing. But yeah, let's keep going, keep figuring this out here. I saw the question mark earlier. Play any number of times. And yeah, that's it for the repeats. Then we have, so here we have the square brackets with the repeats. Here we have the angled brackets. So the angled brackets mean anything placed in between them may be omitted, basically. There's also an alternate notation, which is the E going up and the R with the down arrow, which just tells the player exit or return, right? So you can omit a section that's between an exit and a return, right? You exit here and you omit this stuff and then you return there. Okay, the n comma y stuff just means no and yes, right? Which is sort of like a weighted distribution thing. It's like, as a rule, omit it, or as a rule, skip it, or don't skip it, sorry. Yes, play it. And then and comma y, which we saw earlier, uh, it's dependent on the repeats, I guess. If you return to the same thing, you should play it. Right, so back to piece number 2, right? The n comma y omission thing is here. So it's better to um, omit this measure on the first playthrough. Notice we have repeats that span 4 measures here, right, onto the second line. So yeah, if you must uh, play it, then on the first time through, play it 0 times, but on the second time through, play it 6 times. That's if you choose to play it. And you should, on the second time, I guess is what is being applied here. And then this measure, you always repeat it 7 times at the end of this thing. So, okay, that's another layer of stuff to think about, the omission stuff. Also, there's this dotted final bar line, which which indicates you can just stop playing the piece. So there's 3 pieces. So you can just stop playing the movement of music. The variants, so this is where the path is like a completely different piece of music. It's going to be written on a separate staff. So that's sort of like an osseous staff, except the function is different. It's not to make something easier to play. It's literally to just give different music. Um, and you can also there's also this notation he does where if you have grace notes, right, and small note heads, then it indicates you could do any note that's in that what looks like a chord or any combination of them. That's pretty clear, I think, in his directions. But so this variant thing, you can write completely new music, new pitches, new rhythms. This thing, the only variable is pitch. So he's just using note heads and this little slash to indicate like when another path is present, kind of. Also, you can have articulations that are optional. So if there's a slash through a slur, you may play it or you may not play it. A grace note in between an omission sign is to be played like including what's in the omission sign or not including it. So that's pretty straightforward. It's just a different use of the same symbol that we learned earlier. An arrowed slur means that the durations near it may be altered um, without changing, obviously, when the note on is, or, well, I guess it can change that. But the general space that the note occupies is flexible. Okay, first, last, last of last, equal sign, and um, greater than or equal to restrict the choice of variants within a repeating section. So if he writes first, variant is only possible on the first playthrough and then not. Okay. Same thing with last. And it's not clear to me if this is referring to the large note head or just like whatever variant you choose. I guess we'll see in performance. So last of last is reserved for repeats within repeats. So obviously it's like the last time you repeat that section and on the last repetition, then you can use that variant. Equals when repeating, the same variant should be played, right? So once you commit to the variant, say you start playing this measure with the A, I'm assuming this is in treble clef, with the high A to start, then you have to keep playing that. Greater than or equal to, which I mistook as an accent earlier, when repeating regular notes may be replaced by alternative grace notes at some moment, and playing of related or independent grace notes may be stopped. So it's sort of just used to um, yeah, indicate any and all possibilities, I guess. It's sort of like as a foil to this equal sign thing. And then we have all of these fermatas. So this is the thing that really stuck out to me when I was looking at this earlier. He has three sizes of fermata. This notation is not one I've seen before. Usually it's like triangle, squares, rounded. This is different. But I think he does it this way so that he can introduce dotted fermatas, which are like optional, right? So if you have a solid and a dotted, that's regular or long. If you just have dotted without the dot, right? Without the fermata's typical dot, optional short, and you get the idea. That's sort of just how it works. Uh, Fermata with an X is going to multiply the duration of the note by an integer. So if it's over a quarter note, you have to play a half note or a dotted half note or a whole note, etc. Right? If it's on top of a dotted 16th, you have to play a, the duration of a dotted eighth or a dotted quarter or, you know, etc. This is just optional. Then he introduces numbers so that there's like, say this is over a quarter, it at least has to be played as long as a dotted quarter, but you could play it as long as a whole note or a whole note plus a quarter, or a dotted whole note, etc. Same thing with this. If you see this over a quarter note, you can basically only play. Um, if you see this over a quarter note, you can basically only play its normal duration, a half note, or a dotted quarter. The brackets just mean should probably not change it, right? Notice it's a 1. So you could technically just notate this X fermata with a 1 above it, and it would effectively do nothing. Um, or you could put a 0 on top of it, and you would just omit the note in performance. That's sort of the logical continuation of this use of numbers. You could put 100 over top of it, and then the line on top, and it could be like you can hold it to up to 100 times its length or whatever. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Then we have some more detailed stuff, like he just has a unique notation for breaking a chord, and he has some miscellaneous things here. Like this is how you should do tremolos, for example. Brackets following a dynamic mean you can stop playing the dynamic after the bracket is completed. So it's sort of like becomes optional after the end of that bracket. Is there a good example of that? I don't think the first movement has meant much in the way of dynamics. Oh no, it does. You can see here on the second page there's an alternate path, right? And all kinds of fermatas. Um, wow, okay. So yeah, this just glancing through this, it's kind of nuts. The second movement has this double path thing going on. I don't even like, let's see if we can make sense of this, right? I think what he's doing here is you have to play through both of these lines of music instead of doing this, whatever's going on here. But there's also this alternate path here, right? So if you play this first measure, then you have these two paths to choose from. Before you start playing this measure, you have all three paths to choose from. And the this path, the big one at the bottom, has enters and exits, or sorry, enters and returns, right? So you could technically leave after this optional fermata, um, and then return here and just continue playing. Or you could leave after this optional fermata or this one, right? So that's a whole bunch of paths there. These other fermatas are not optional, but the ties are. And then you have, if you decide to just play it normally, which is like repeating this and then doing this, these three measures, then you have uh, an optional tie to a half note that has its own fermata that may be long or regular. And then this is all followed by a rest that maybe it's ordinary length or may have a fermata on it or maybe a large fermata. Oh, and also you have to repeat this 6 times, this first thing. And there's this optional slur which has this other logic symbol that I forget about already. Um, so yeah, that's the sort of, I don't know how you would sight read this and just improvise. It seems very difficult, but the advantages of the notation is like you get to work with numbers, and as I was sort of explaining earlier, you could just extrapolate this and write all kinds of things that would take forever to notate differently, right? Like the fact that he's able to fit all of this on 11 pages is kind of crazy because if you had to write out every single path, it would be like 100 pages of music or 200 pages. When he has early exits for an entire movement, then he labels the rest of it appendix. So, like the first movement, I think, yeah, piece number one has two appendices because you can just finish the movement here on page four, or you can finish it here on page five, or you can go to the end of page five. Um, and of course, there's a bunch of exits and returns near the end, so you could technically end it earlier, I think. Yeah, you could end it as early as this exit and just skip the whole last line. So it might be a lot of fun to play with, but I'm curious how much the composer himself improvises with this. You can see a performance is typically 20 minutes. I guess it could be all kinds of durations, but this performance is by Anton Batagov at Moscow Conservatory in, I guess, in 1992, so 2 years after its composition. So, yeah, hopefully you're excited to get into this. Thanks for humoring me looking at the performance notes, and maybe it'll help you follow along with this score video, um, and I'll let you know my thoughts. All right, so I'm glad I revisited this. I kind of see why I decided to download the score last time I listened to it, because it's got this very pretty minimalistic quality to it. This performer pretty much took every repeat, like he didn't omit very much and sort of did the maximum number of most repeats. Took a lot of the fermatas, not all of them. Um, yeah, I guess the third one, strangely, does not have a lot of these optional paths. There's just like, the occasional slash for the number of repeats, and then, of course, these fermatas, these optional fermatas that are at the end of each phrase. Um, so I guess either he wanted to do one that was more plain, or he felt that this idea was so simple that there was only a few ways to play it. It was not deserving of all these different executions. Um, I think the second one was probably my favorite, uh, just because it was had a lot going on for it. In this YouTube video, the appendices are sort of labeled as their own movements, and I guess they kind of sound like that. Um, but they should be, I think, conceptualized as belonging to the first movement. There are also some discrepancies between the score I have and the one on YouTube. So this would have been the 1992 version, and I think this edition was 2003. This may be the 2013 edition. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a really fascinating little piece of Russian music, and maybe you find some of these notations interesting. I think some of them are worth exploring. Um, but it's very dense with them. So, especially the first movement. Um, and it sort of is conducive to this type of composing with a lot of repetition. I think most of it functions on this premise that you're playing like these little musical cells that are going to be repeated a lot. Um, so it might sort of, if you adopt some of these symbols, you might have to force yourself into that box stylistically. Um, some moments were really fun. Like there was one moment where there was a bunch of um, possible short fermatas. So this is just like a very like laborious way of saying like um, tempo rubato, I guess. Um, and then there's these entrances and exits at the end, which are kind of fun. That's the end of the second movement. I guess the notation allows him to sort of change some of these things on the fly and focus on what's important to him in the piece, which is how many times things are repeated, how long things are held, um, when different notes are an option in a given repeat, that sort of thing. And he gets real creative with it. So that's it for piano pieces 1 through 3. I also believe there's a piano piece number 4, which we're not going to look at. And I think it's completely different from these. So, yeah, check out this score if you are interested by this stuff. I think it's free on IMSLP. I got it off of his personal website, also for free. So, yeah. Tomorrow we're going to look at another one of his pieces. I think it might be his piano sonata, and we'll just keep going from there. I have a lot of his scores from this year, 1990.